I grew up in Santa Clarita, where Magic Mountain is.
Yeah,
just
I,
north of LA.
Valencia, I tried to go to CalArts.
Oh my.
They sent me a letter saying that I didn't get accepted. Obviously, that was like the first time I like ever got my dreams crushed, was not being able to go to that school.
Really?
Yeah.
That was a pretty hardcore party school. They have the craziest Halloween parties, and everyone was on acid and running around naked and
Yeah.
all the time. Crazy school. My best friend was a stripper, and she was moved down to LA to work, and I was working at Princess Cruises at the time, and I was miserable, and I was like, I want to work in the movie industry. I love movies. And she was like, if you're gonna work in the movie industry, you've got to come to LA. So she's like, she lived in Studio City, right on Ventura and Vineland, and so she's like, come live with me. So I moved down there, got a job at Studio City Animal Hospital, started to meet like famous people. You know, Cher would bring her cat in, and some other actors and stuff. And my friend Chrissy, that a girl that I went to high school with, Kelly Packard, was on Baywatch and some other, like a Saved by the Bell spinoff. And so she got her friend into it, and I knew them, and she was like, MTV's hiring for Undressed. It was like a cheesy...
I remember that. I remember that shit. That was like so provocative for the time. Yeah.
Yes,
I remember
because
like
they had...
like 13, 14 and watching. I was like, oh.
Yes, because it was pretty much just teenage drama before there was reality TV, and it was like girls kissing girls. It was typical high school or college life, but... she was like, I'll make you a fake resume of like B movies that I did that went straight to video. And she's like, just tell them you know how to lock up the set and wrangle extras. So I went on the interview and totally lied. And they were like, okay, that's it. That was my first job on TV.
Yeah, I had to go. I went to UNLV. I went to film school, and they said the same thing. If you want to make any money, you got to be in Los Angeles to do it. So I just worked for free for a year. Met a few guys from Los Angeles, and ended up moving in with some of them and getting on a show. So I mean, I got pretty lucky, but it was definitely difficult to at least get there and get like the wheels turning on things. So I think you lucked out with knowing somebody to where you could actually move in, and they wanted you to move in.
It's definitely who you know.
Yeah, like I tried to hand them my resume and make it look all nice, and they didn't give a shit.
From that, the next job I got was like post-production on The Wedding Planner. So
What, the Adam Sandler movie?
No.
That's The Wedding Singer.
Wedding Singer.
Yeah.
It was like, movie magic when you hear, I just showed up and I'm a movie star now. I mean, I'm not a movie star, but I worked on Men in Black 2 and then 9/11.
What a treat.
Yeah, that was amazing.
And the hard thing about the film industry is like, it's not like a 9 to 5 where you get a job and like, you know you're going to get a paycheck. You have to wait. You do the whole gig, and then you like in the middle of it, you're like, oh, this is never gonna end. This is going great, and then it ends, and you have to get on something else.
Yes.
And the rent is so high in Los Angeles that you're struggling, and then the production companies take like months to pay you. Then they send you a check, and so you're sitting there waiting. You're trying to pay your rent, and it just is such a dysfunctional place. And I thought when I was there that if I was to make it in the film industry and that everything would be going good, that it would sort of fill that void in me. But the whole time before that, I was drinking and doing pills. No matter how big things got for me, I mean, my dream was to work on Adult Swim. And I was working for Adult Swim on Robot Chicken. And like, I remember just being there working, and all I wanted to do was get off work to go pick up pills. And nothing seemed to... fill the void. You'd think that living that life is like you made it, but no matter, it's like an illusion. Like no matter what how far you go in it, it's still, you don't feel like complete on the inside. And I think that's why a lot of actors are drug addicts. Where did drugs kick off for you? Was it like alcohol starting off?
No, I went straight to acid.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was the first drug I ever did.
Acid.
Venice Beach, acid trip.
I was too scared to do psychedelics because I already had so much anxiety and depression. I thought that you hear about bad trips and everything. I thought for sure I would like kill myself from how paranoid I would get, because I couldn't even smoke weed without getting paranoid. I remember I got to LA and I saw a friend there that I went to film school with. I went over to his house. I got there and he was in his bathroom and he was like spraying some butane into this like bottle with weed in it. And I was like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm making dabs." And it goes in a government like standpoint, this is like I'm making crack if I was to get arrested for it. He made this stuff, it was like molasses that had come out of the bottom of the tube, and then he put on like a little, like, it looked like a crack torch pipe, and then you take a hit of it. I remember I took a hit of it, and like I hadn't smoked weed in a long time, and then he goes, "Oh, let's go to Walmart and pick up some stuff." And we were down by Crenshaw. And so he took me to the Crenshaw Walmart, and it's not like Walmart's where it's like a big open place. There it's like 19 levels stacked up on top of each other, and you have to keep going up this escalator to get to the different spots. And I remember being so blitzed on weed out of my mind, walking around that place and people staring at me. I had a panic attack. I had to go into the bathroom and splash water in my face. Like, "You can do this. You can do this. You're gonna make it through this." And that's just from weed. So if I was to try acid or something like that, then I feel like it would be game over, man.
I always avoided Walmarts or anywhere with fluorescent lighting on any drug.
It was. I remember feeling such fear, and there was nothing to feel fear about. And that's why I always was taking downers, was because I just hated that feeling so much that I would do anything to avoid it.
I went to the opposite. I was had suffered from depression as a kid. I went through some sexual trauma at a young age. I got molested by a female when I was, over the course of a summer, I think I was like 9 or 10. So I was always pretty moody and depressed, and not having dealt with that trauma. I did acid, and then I eventually, a girlfriend of mine at the time had introduced me to meth for the first time, and we did that in Temecula. And I got kicked out of my house and moved in with them. They were French, and her dad was a chef at a restaurant, and I did meth for the first time, and I just remember I was like, this is who I want to be. I was like, I have energy, I want to talk to people. I felt invincible.
How long did you sustain living on meth like that? Because it brings you down super quick.
I had started, drinking, smoking weed after that. But for the most part, I didn't do meth again. I don't think for like another 6 months. I didn't know anyone who did it or had it. Right after that, I met my buddy Bob, who did meth regularly. So as soon as I started doing that more regularly, I didn't stop till almost 2 years ago. So 19 to 43.
And no one suspected you were doing meth on set, or?
No, they love me.
Yeah.
Oh man, 12-hour days minimum.
Yeah.
They were like, "Look at that guy go.
Yeah.
He's awesome." I had, by that time I had developed a pretty strict routine of how to maintain meth. Like I had done it in my 20s and stuff. My parents kind of knew that I was on drugs. My dad was a heroin addict before I was born and stuff. So it's not like my parents were oblivious to it. I think they just kind of ignored it. Had gone to a couple of rinky-dink rehabs, but had learned to hide it really, really well. So I would eat in the morning and I would work all day. Most of the time I did different. I was a PA, like set PA, wardrobe PA, post-production PA. So I was out and about all day, driving around LA. Eventually I did locations, which was a dream, because you could just go and do whatever you wanted all day. So that was perfect for being on meth. And then I'd get off work. Most of the time I was making so much money, I'd just go buy clothes to go to a club and then go clubbing all night and then go to work in the morning.
Did not sleep ever.
Not sleep at all, and I'd crash on the weekends.
Yeah, see, I was on opiates, and I tried to maintain a set life on in the industry, and I when I got there, I thought I was escaping my problems because I'm from Las Vegas, and that's where I knew everyone to where I could get my drugs. But when I went to Los Angeles, the people I moved in were pretty, I don't know, like square. Like they didn't even like to drink really, and so I mean, I didn't know anyone to where I could get any of the stuff that I was using, and I thought I would eventually just stop doing the drugs. But then I would have to, when something would go wrong in my life, I would drive back to Las Vegas, pick up some drugs, do it for a couple days, and then go back. And then before I had to show up on set, I would detox for like a day or so, and then show up and then try to pull it off. But it was so hard, and I mean, I don't know how I did the 12-hour days too. I don't know how. I did it, 6 days a week.
Yeah.
It was killing me, and I remember just trying to drink and have that be okay, but it never really was. Like I always really wanted my drug of choice, and I tried to just be normal and like drink and smoke weed because everyone was smoking weed there. When you were doing meth, how bad did it get? I mean, you obviously were able to hang in there for a long time, and then you were making enough money to maintain using. Where did you even decide to consider to stop using it, or decide that it was a problem? I guess I should say.
I never really thought it was a problem. I knew
because everyone's on coke there, anyways.
Yeah, I mean everyone that I knew was partying. I mean you go to parties in the hills and you see the actors and directors and all of my friends. They all partied. I had a secret life. So, like, we'd go to a club till 2 o'clock, and then I'd be like, oh, I'm going. Then everyone would be like, all right, have a good night, see you tomorrow, or whatever. And I'd go out on my own. So no one really, I had my close circle of friends that kind of knew, but everyone was like, he's maintaining, shows up to work, and he gets stuff done. I mean, I'd have those cycles where, towards the end of Men in Black 2, got pretty bad, where I was smoking in the bathrooms and
it's always bound to happen, smoking in the bathrooms.
And you can't like if you couldn't find anything, you'd start crashing and start nodding out just because you haven't slept in a week. I always tried to eat and at least be still for a few hours during the night to kind of rest, and then I always crash on the weekends. But it started to get worse. I got really involved in the West Hollywood lifestyle. I met a buddy of mine from Santa Clarita that I ran into randomly. Me and Bob went to go re-up. We were dealing.
So that's why you're making all the money.
Well, this was before the movie.
Because I know how it is with PA salary, man, and
this is a little before the movie industry, but and I lived off petty cash. We went to his house to re-up, and I didn't end up leaving for a year, and he was getting crystal from the Palmdale, Lancaster area and then selling it in West Hollywood for like 5 times as much. So he introduced me to a lot of the clubs and the West Hollywood lifestyle, and then that's when things just went south really bad. So
I lived right there. I lived on Highland and Sunset for a little bit, and then Fountain and what was it? Right there by that police station. Oh my God.
That gives me chills. Yeah. Just hearing those street names.
When I got my place, we went in there, and it was during the middle of the day, and it didn't seem so loud. Yeah. But I looked when I moved in across the street, and there was a police dispatch, and so I didn't hear silence for like a year and a half at least, because at any time of night or whatever, fire trucks, ambulance, cop cars, they'd even like mess with their little thing, like whoop, 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 whoop. My room would light up red and blue, and I just have a panic attack. I don't know how anyone does it their whole life. Yeah. Like I don't know. It really was destructive on my mental serenity too.
Yeah.
I was trying to get my act together. I mean, I really wanted to have things work out there, and when it didn't, when I finally realized that I was so deep in my addiction that I couldn't maintain jobs and I couldn't keep moving forward the way I was moving, and then I had to move back. I felt like such a loser on the inside, because when you're there, you talk to people and you're like, oh yeah, man, this person quit and moved away or whatever. They couldn't hang.
Yeah.
They couldn't cut it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that can't be me. Like,
yeah.
I have to make it work somehow.
Yeah.
And I'm just glad I still get to do it, but that industry there is all about narcissism. It's all about, like, do I look good? How do I appear? How you just are so caught up in it, and it's so poisonous on yourself. I don't know how everyone there is not a drug addict or an alcoholic. I mean, they pretty much are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone's addicted to something there.
If you really...
It's a meat grinder. It really pulls people in and chews them up, and whoever, you just get spit out, and it just depends on how blessed you are, if you can walk when you get out, or...
Yeah.
I have a lot of friends that never made it out, and I have a lot of friends that are just gacked out, that have, brain damage or severe issues. So I'm really lucky I made it out.
Yeah, I had to go through that to realize that that wasn't what I wanted. Even when I came here for treatment, I remember just talking about, like, if I get sober and things on track, that that still will be what I want, that lifestyle. And then I had to realize that I had to give that up. That was like the last thing of, like, control, like how we talk about how you have to give up your control to your higher power or, God. That was the last thing. I go, God.
Yeah.
I'm done. If you want me back there, it better be a pretty sweet job.
Yeah.
But I'm not going back unless, it's the road's paved, I got to do a lot of cool stuff, but it's just not where I'm supposed to be. And I had to accept that. I really had to learn that God had something else planned for me.
Yeah.
And I had to go through that just to prove to myself that it wasn't going to be what fulfilled me on the inside.
Exactly. I was raised in a Christian household. It was a loose Christian household. We went to church kind of often. I knew, I had a faith and stuff. I ran from it from a long time. But shortly after the film industry, God took that out of my heart. And I just knew I didn't want to do it anymore. Mine was like just instant. I was like, I'm done. You can have it. A lot of it was I went to rehab down in San Diego, went to a sober living in Costa Mesa, which was a crack house, and relapsed there. And then that's when my drug use went to another level. I started slamming.
I mean, I don't know how anyone pulls himself out of slamming drugs. That's one thing I never ended up getting to, because I was always thinking that I was going to go to sleep and wake up and then not want to use the next day. Oh. And then so if I was to slam drugs, shoot it, then I would be like, okay, well, this is my permanent decision. I want to be addicted to this, because even my drug dealers are like, don't do it.
Yeah, I wish I had never done it. It's really intense, and it was that next level high that I needed, and I loved it. There were bouts where I moved back to Santa Clarita, got a job at Starbucks, was managing Starbucks for 10 years. And I'd have months of sobriety and then a relapse. And it was real easy. I mean, you can use every day and nobody would know.
They just think you're drinking a bunch of coffee at Starbucks.
I mean, I'm at Starbucks. Everyone's
a quadruple.
Everyone's gacked out anyway on caffeine. I did do the steps. I found a sponsor, and I did go through the 12-step program, but...
And it cured you instantly, huh?
Exactly. And nothing had changed.
Yeah.
Right? I had done the 12 steps for my family, and I knew I was really good at manipulating people, and I knew what people wanted to hear. So I did the steps, and I was like, okay, I'm done. Why don't I feel any different? And I dove right back into the West Hollywood lifestyle. I had unwanted same-sex attraction that I had been struggling with for most of my life. That it wasn't something while I lived in Hollywood, I openly embraced it, and I lived in West Hollywood and I partied in West Hollywood, but it wasn't something that I was fully comfortable with. It was something that was tied in with the meth use. It's huge in the gay community, methamphetamine, and partying. So it became something that fueled that. I never dated anyone. I never thought I could date somebody like that. So it was just a lot of partying and one night stands. And then I learned, well, you can just use people to get meth and they'll party with you. So that was a whole nother part of, I call it like my second stage of addiction. Once I had a moment of clarity during a stint of sobriety, and I was like, this isn't who I am. This isn't who I want to identify. That's not how I'm going to identify myself anymore. And when I started to tell my friends in the community that I wasn't going to identify as gay anymore, that I didn't think that's who I was, and God was giving me a lot of, I think, wisdom, and he was just changing who I was.
Do you think that had to do with you remember when you said the trauma that occurred from the I guess inappropriate stuff with you and that older lady? Yeah. Do you think it stemmed from that, or do you think that you were born and you had those feelings? Like,
no, I don't believe personally, this is my own, I don't put this off on anyone else. I don't believe people are born that way. I wasn't born that way. I think it was a culmination of environmental factors. And I've done a lot of research and study on it, that there's actually more evidence that addiction is hereditary than homosexuality. So I think there was a lot of issues in my family growing up. My dad worked a lot. He wasn't really there. He wasn't an emotional or touchy-feely kind of guy. And he worked really hard for us, and I would never speak ill of my parents because they had their issues, but my dad passed away a few years ago, but we had reconciled, and they're really strong Christians, and they got sober and raised us really well, the best they could. So there were a lot of things that happened that contributed to that I could see now that, oh, yes, sexual abuse trauma happens. And then I never bonded with my dad. My mom was the head of the household. I was really close with her. I have a twin sister and a little sister. So I was constantly raised around women, so I'm really sensitive towards, I liked the arts and stuff, and this was in the, 80s. So I was always teased in school for they always, called me gay or fat.
Oh yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone.
So when you have all of those ingredients adding up, plus that reinforcement of everyone telling you that, and then towards like 13, 14, 15, there was a lot of pedophiles involved and stuff. So there was a lot of sexual trauma. So yeah, it would make total sense that all of that would lead into that. You begin to believe this identity, that this is who you are. And the drugs just reinforce that. And once I got sober and really became a Christian and started to understand what the Bible was and having healthy relationships with people, and they were breathing life into me, and I was learning what is real love, what is a healthy relationship. I still had that hole inside of me. I was like, something is still wrong. And I was like, you know what? I think it's the same-sex attraction thing. And so it's not something that I'm cured of. It's something I live with. It's just at this point now, I love God more than I do my flesh.
You have like a handle on things that you thought maybe controlled you before, like your addiction and compulsivity. That's what we all wanted out of we all struggled with that.
Absolutely.
And it led off into things like, I don't know, gambling, like anything. It can be anything. And it just somehow manifests in different ways in different people. Well, you came here a couple of years ago. What made you want to come to Arizona?
Well, I got a job. I went back to school, got my bachelor's in social work. I had been getting some counseling from a pastor friend of mine from Grace Baptist Church in Santa Clarita. And they were like really the first church. I'd been to every major church, just asking questions, getting to know what this relationship, this Christianity, what the Bible meant, and really digging deep into it. And he was the first person that was like, look, I don't know where you're coming from. I don't struggle with that, but hey, I love you, and we'll work through it. So he kind of was like, oh, I think you'd be a really good social worker. So I went to school, got that. And then I came out here to work for social services department. And I had this grandiose idea of this life that I wanted. And I was like, okay, I want to live in the mountains. I want to fish. I want to hunt. My life had changed so drastically. My heart had changed so drastically. And everything that I thought who I was wasn't. And it was crazy to finally realize that, like, that was a completely different person. And I felt like I know it's cliche to say reborn, but
that's the idea.
Yeah.
That's the whole present in all this, is feeling that way.
Yes.
You know, that's the whole way of when you give the control over, when you start to say, hey, God, I'm not the God of the universe, you are.
Yeah.
You know, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, you know, that wasn't so hard, but I feel great.
And it didn't happen in an instant. Like, so many places were like, oh, just become a Christian and, you know, you're a new creature in Christ and all the old things passed away. And yes, that's true. But for me, it was an ongoing process, and it still is. So I found they were taking jobs in Sholo, Arizona, which was this little sleepy mountain town up in the north. And so I moved there and was like, okay, I'm going to start this new life. And then I relapsed. Relapse has always been a really interesting part of my recovery. Because like they say, you always start off from the bottom. And it was just really bad from the start. But up there, I realized, hey, you need to stop following this ideal that you want. And start, because my ideal was always mine, and it never involved anyone else. It never involved having meaningful relationships with people, having friends. I always led different lives to different people, and I was always somebody else for what they needed. I was never Kenneth. We actually had a work retreat in Prescott. A pastor friend of mine, Ron Merrill, was a pastor of Heights Church out here.
Yeah, he helped me put this he had a podcast.
Yeah.
I had breakfast with him.
Yeah.
And like he kind of laid it out and how to go about it. And so him and I are pretty cool now. So that's cool that he's also helped you out.
Oh yeah, he was the pastor of my church in California.
Oh really?
Yeah, him and Mike Gaston.
Oh yeah, because he used to work write for Jay Leno. He used to be a writer and stand up.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool how God's kind of pulling things together.
I swear, if I could track everything that God's done to pull my life together, it's amazing. It's unbelievable.
Like how you think you're going one way, but you're actually going the right way.
Yes.
Like how you think that you're going off track and, you know, everything's falling apart. Well, then you get, oh, well, I understand now.
Yes. It's like your MapQuest analogy that I love. Even more than compass.
Yeah, we talked about this last week about God being a compass. Well, you did.
Yeah.
And then I just remember going through what I've gone through, how many times I've messed up and made mistakes.
Yes.
And so my God's kind of like MapQuest, you know? He's like, you know, take a right turn here, and you're like, nah, and you go this way, and then eventually, you know, you get to where you're supposed to be at.
Yes.
But you took the wrong turns.
Yeah.
And even though you saw the way that it wanted you to go, and it's like, oh, that looks like it's going to be too much traffic. I'm going to take Fountain or whatever.
Yeah.
I should have taken Fountain. You take Sunset.
Yes.
And you get stuck. and then and then it ends up, taking forever, but then eventually you get there. I just look back and see all those mistakes I made and how it took me to where I feel like I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
You
I had to look at everything I was doing wrong. And my mom always told me, whatever you're doing, just do the opposite. Because everything you've done, look at everything you've done that's gotten you where you're at. What do you usually do? And I'd be like, use, relapse, all this stuff. She goes, do the opposite of what you would normally do. And I started taking her advice. And so I was like, okay, so I'm just going to move to Prescott and just dive head into church and everything that I had never done. So within 30 days, they transferred me here. I found an apartment, and I just went to Ron and was like, look, I know I can't get away with stuff here. I need accountability. I need people in my life that are going to hold me accountable and not let me isolate.
It is usually the harder way of doing something. It's not the convenient, comfortable way. And then you realize that convenience and comfort is almost like a slow death. Like it's your destruction,
It's like slow poison.
Yeah, and stepping out of that bubble that you have for yourself and going out and doing the hard thing and talking to people when you wouldn't normally talk to, or it's comfortable to isolate because you're safe. And then get out there and actually do stuff. That's where all of your growth and maturity will come, especially with your recovery and addiction. And you're progressing, and then eventually you're going to see that come into fruition in your life.
Yeah. And I remember finding Elements and going there, being scared out of my mind because they were having a bonfire in the front. There was like 200 people there. I know, not my scene. Like, if it had been a rave or a club, probably in the past it would have been like cool. But I was like, these are all sober people. And then it was a Christ-centered recovery program. So I remember the first time I went in there, I was high, ditched. Second time I went in there, I was sober, but was so nervous I couldn't stop sweating. So I was sitting in the back thinking, everyone thinks I'm tweaked out, left. And then finally I was like, I'm done. I did a pretty good weekend shot fest, doing hot shots and stuff. And I was just like, I'm going to end it. I'm just going to kill myself if I don't get it this time. So I went in there. And I remember Luke was doing sound, and I was like, who runs this? And he was like, that guy. And he pointed to Bob Hoyt. And I was like,
sir, who runs this?
Yes.
Event,
I was
sir?
like, this was like literally that moment of desperation where and I went up to Bob, and I was like, if I don't get a sponsor, and if I don't get sober, I'm going to kill myself.
I remember you talking about this like a year ago or something. Mm-hmm. Like when you got your year. Maybe it was a little bit before that, and just how you came in and you just desperately needed help.
Yeah.
Man, I showed up here to Prescott on a Thursday, and I was detoxing like crazy. And they're like, do you want to go to a place where there's like 200 people? And I'm like coming off all these antidepressants, psych meds, and like opiates and whatever. And I'm just like, no, please just let me go to sleep. And then I ended up going back the next week. Same feeling, like, oh man, like this is not my crowd. No. Because I was holding on to that control. I was holding on to like, ooh, I don't like this. I don't want to talk to anyone. I need to be away from this.
Yeah.
Then I met Earl, because he was very upfront about it. He would get in my face and ask me questions and joke with me. And then eventually, after I started feeling better, I started talking with them and started meeting different people. And then it helped me get out of my shell. That I was stuck in for so long.
Yeah.
And thank God I did. Thank God we did. Thank God that it worked out to where we found a community that was going to help us, because I needed it. I mean, if I didn't have all of those people that were there, that at one point I didn't even want anything to do with them, and then now I've lived here and this is like, worked for me. I changed everything. So now, because this has worked so well for me, like, if I didn't give it that shot, then I would probably be dead too, because I would have been like, this isn't working. Let me go back to what I know.
I started going to the Wednesday night men's Bible study, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody is interested in that, ask. It's great. And then I met Earl, who became my sponsor.
Oh yeah, he's my sponsor too.
Yeah.
I didn't know that he was your sponsor. Seems like he got an army of sponsees in town.
Amazing guy, and going to that Bible study was scary, but I knew I had to open up and tell people, be honest with people, and I had never done that in my life. I had never shared, I was West Hollywood Ken for those people. I was Hollywood Kenny for these people, and I was Kenneth at home for my parents. And I had lived all these 3 different identities, and I was like, I just need to be honest with people. And Elements and the Heights Men's Bible Study and the people at Heights Church were just like, we just come as you are. And they wanted to listen. Earl wanted to hear my story, and he wasn't judgmental, and I think that's so important for addicts, especially addicts who want to get sober, is that everybody has a story, and I'm in school now getting my master's degree in counseling, and right now I have a substance abuse class, which was like, oh, this class will be cake. But when you hear people talk about it that are normies and they don't understand it, they're just like, oh, well, addicts just choose.
Yeah, I've talked about that so much on here, man.
Especially in the church, it's unfortunate, but God bless them. But they're just like, well, they make really bad choices, and they just need to stop.
Like, why? Yeah, like people in my life that saw me using and saw that how much destruction it caused. Like, well, why doesn't he just stop using?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh man, if you only knew how the feeling is and the compulsion that you're a slave to where you can be thinking this way and like, I'm not going to do it, but your body's moving in a different direction. You can be like, I'm not doing it. And it somehow is like pulls you into it every time. And no matter how many times you get high and you go, well, man, this is my last time. I'm out. You always end up going. And I think what really ended up working was we moved out of the comfort zone or the cage that we were so familiar with in LA. We moved out. We got uncomfortable. We found a group of people that had similar problems that we could share with, and being vulnerable and talking about some of the stuff that we've gone through is tough. And you think in the back of your mind, like, oh, if I just don't talk about it, it'll go away. Like, if you're a man and you just, deal with your problems like, you're taught to do, it'll just fix itself. No, and it just causes more and more destruction. And so when you get around people that, are hurting too, and you just start talking with them about it, and then the next day, if the stuff that you didn't want to talk about, you talk about it again to somebody, and it doesn't hurt as bad the second time. Then you do that again, it doesn't hurt as bad, and you just keep going with it, and then you start to figure out things that you might not have thought to think of that happened to you in the past that you're like, oh, I didn't realize that bothered me so much. Exactly. And then you just all of a sudden start feeling better.
Yeah, and I've heard so many people kind of compare that kind of sharing with like the onion, and as you peel the layers, it gets stinkier and stinkier, and it makes you cry. But each level that I would peel back, the more I would share, the more stuff that would come to the surface. And I was like, it took me like 25 years to be able to say, oh my gosh, I was molested for a course of a summer. Like, I thought it was my fault. And, I got a lot of therapy and did a lot of counseling and stuff. So, it took all this time to be able to deal with and address all those issues. And because of the environment that I surrounded myself with like people like you and Earl, and people in recovery, and people who share the same faith as me, they were able to absorb it, kind of, as you give it away. The program says you give away parts of yourself. they dissipate and you're able to deal with them. And when they pop back up, it's not that big of a deal anymore.
When you came here, did you ever see yourself being able to teach a group of guys?
No.
Because you're really throwing it down here now, man. Like you're really like one of the guys that I see people that look up to and look for advice, and you know what you're talking about, you know?
Never.
No, dude. Well, then you fooled me this whole damn time.
If you had told me 20 years ago that I'd be in Prescott, Arizona, fishing, applying for a hunting draw, I now work at Heights Church, working for the church, and being sober and leading Bible studies. And happy in Prescott. And loving it.
And loving it, yeah.
I would have spit in your... I was so mad at God and so anti anything I do now. I mean, no.
Yeah.
Never. Ever.
What was it just from when you were a kid that made you want to go back to following Christ or recognizing that he was with you this whole time versus like how you said that you were anti-God and throwing it away? When you started to get out of, you realize, hey, this isn't the life for me in LA, the West Hollywood life. You're like, this isn't the way it's going. I'm going to go back to God. Like, what made you want to go back to?
I think it was being raised with an understanding of Christ. Yes, I was really mad at God for a long time for the same-sex attraction. I didn't understand why I had it. I hated it. It was a source of a lot of pain, both before I had a lot of shame because of it, and then I accepted it, and it was just a terrible lifestyle for me. And then afterwards, I was like, what am I supposed to do now? Like, Christians, like the Christians that I had experienced in some churches were just like,
not about it.
God's purpose for you is to be married and have children. Like, and I was like, I don't know if that's for me.
And they told you just to pray the gay away.
Pray the gay away. I actually
like that works.
I actually even went to a conversion place in Tennessee for a summer, and I was just like, no, that's not biblical. It's not. God's plan for me was not to be a straight man. It was just to be a follower of Christ, regardless. And I think that upbringing planted that seed, and then being able to have clarity of mind and being sober, finding people who were Christians who had strong biblical doctrine and were crazy Christians that were just like, hey,
more like culty,
like
they were actually accepting
and like, hey, this has nothing to do with who you are. It's just as cheating on your wife is just as bad as doing anything else. Sin is sin.
Yeah, that's the point where people that really have an understanding of Christ and how to follow them understand that sin is sin. Yes. So like some way or another, what we've gone through, including what you went through with same-sex attraction, has somehow bounced off and helped somebody else, or has done something in some sort of chain reaction that it was God's purpose for you to have gone through this.
Exactly.
So you had to have, in order to fulfill his purpose. That might sound bad. I mean, I had to go through it, being a drug addict, to finally get to the point where I could speak about this and start helping guys.
Yeah.
And hopefully, that was his purpose.
Exactly.
I'm like, I know that it sounds bad to say that God purposefully, had it, and, knew we were gonna sin, but we had to figure out on our own.
It's the what did you call it?
A map quest.
Map quest.
Yeah.
Map quest. It's like these events happened in my life for whatever reason. I don't think God was like, okay, I want you to be molested to do this.
No.
But he autocorrects everything. I mean, I have my twin sister's a lesbian and she's married to a woman, and I'm like, I love you no matter what. We all have our different pasts, but like Paul said, I was given a thorn in my flesh to humble me before God, to keep me on my knees, to keep me from boasting and being arrogant. Well, I was pretty boastful and arrogant. So if this is what God has in store for my life for this short amount of time compared to eternity, then I'm cool with it. I'm okay.
It's a fair trade.
It really is.
It's a gentleman's trade.
In the grand scheme of how short this life is, he's made every dream of my life ever come true, good and bad. Like, I can say I've partied with the best of them. I've partied harder than most of them. I've indulged everything, and praise God, like, I didn't die. I don't have brain damage. I never got arrested. Like, I can look back now and say God's hand was on me through this whole thing.
Looking back at it, it's awesome to see how things pan out. And why can't we move forward knowing that God's going to keep doing that for us? Like, a lot of addicts struggle with that. People are future tripping. People don't, they want to retain that control they feel like they have over their life. But in the end, things are going to work out the same way that they worked out in the past. And we have to trust God that that's all going to continue to happen for us with our life.
Yeah.
When we get to the end, we're like, I see how you did it there too, and even tomorrow and the next day. Versus like, looking back and seeing like, oh man, it sucks we had to go through that. Probably wouldn't want to do it again.
Exactly. Yeah.
But we had to do it.
Yes.
To get to this point to where we feel all right inside,
And when God's got your back, and I know it sounds kind of cliche and cheesy, but nothing really matters. Like, I've gone through so much and been through so much, and he's there. I know I'm forgiven. Even, when I sin, as soon as I walk out of here and someone cuts me off and I flip them off, I know I'm going to be okay. And, that's just how great God is. So when you can wrap yourself in that, you feel secure.
I thought that if God wanted me to be happy, he would have fulfilled all the stuff that I was going for, like what my dreams were, which was to like direct and I don't know, do comedy and I could still do it, but it's just he didn't want me in that environment anymore because it was just tearing me down so much, and I could just see no matter what level I'd get to, I would end up, just sabotaging it. I mean, if I got those things that I wanted back then at the time, and say if I got a bunch of money and I got some gig or whatever, I would have used all that money to kill myself with drugs and alcohol. Yeah. So he knew better than I did, but I was mad that I didn't get it at the time.
And and I look back and I'm like, he gave me everything I wanted. Like, even, I don't want to say he gave me everything I wanted, but he allowed me to have everything I thought I wanted.
To see that it wasn't what you wanted.
Exactly. I was like, oh, it was horrible. I don't want that anymore. I was so tired of driving. I was just like, I got it. Here, take the wheel. I'm good.
You can't imagine how how you would think that would feel better. Like, because if you feel like if you let go of that wheel, you're going to crash. Yeah. And then somehow it's like a Tesla, and you just, this is way more chill. And you still got to do what you got to do. Yeah. For your day. I mean, you got to have a plan. You got to try your best. You got to do what they teach you in the Bible to follow this way, and then your life will be better. Do these things and, treat others with kindness. Don't take things for granted. And the bottom line is gratitude. I feel like when we have gratitude, that's not happiness. Like, you made me happy. It's joy. It's like an eternal, like at the bottom of layer of that void, you're like, you know what, things are all right, and things can go wrong, but you still feel like, hey, this is gonna work out. I've seen it bad before, but you just got to keep working at it, and you'll get past it. You just don't know, but you know that in the end somehow it's all gonna work itself out.
You don't know, and I don't need to know, because God knows, and I'll let him deal with it. And don't get me wrong, like, I put as much into my Christian walk now and sobriety as I did using. And I think I talked about this last week. Like, I work just as hard as when I needed to find dope or to party as I do now. Like, I have my routine in the morning. I do my study. I talk to Earl almost every day. I surround myself with healthy people, and so it's just as hard. It's not easy. I mean, I still want to use at times, and just like last weekend, I was pacing in my house, wanting to use, but I knew that I would be letting myself and God down. I knew God would forgive me. That wasn't really that. I was like, oh, He'll forgive me, but I knew I couldn't go back to that shame and that guilt, and that and it really works when you have a lot of close friends and stuff. I was like, I didn't want to hide anymore. I knew if I use, I would be hit. I would hide and isolate, and it just wasn't. It's not worth it anymore.
That's the key right there. Is that there's so much that you build after you get sober in your life,
Yeah.
and things start to become valuable. You start to appreciate, and you start to have that gratitude.
Yeah.
And then you realize that as soon as you use, especially for real addicts or alcoholics, to where if you have one drink, then it'll start a chain reaction, and that you've seen it before a million times, and it's going to happen again. Then you realize, hey, it's just not worth it. Like, I'm gonna have to figure this out some other way. That's just not an option.
Yeah.
And we'd have to deal with everything as life on life's terms. We have to, whatever's thrown at us. It hurts. We can't go home, have a drink, or smoke a blunt. We got to actually deal with it. But we have that void filled in our heart to where we know that this is the way I got out of it, and this is the way it's going to keep me from going back to it.
Yeah, God has filled that void. So I know what's in there now, and nothing else is going to go in there. Nothing else is going to bring me that joy or that satisfaction that God has. So when God is your foundation, you can knock that house. There's nothing going to penetrate that foundation. So no matter how far down I go, when God is your foundation, I don't break that barrier. To give anyone any advice from someone who's been there, I would say keep trying. Don't ever give up. Even if you're in relapse, you're watching this right now and you're in relapse, it's going to be okay. Put down whatever you're using. Call somebody, come to Elements, get a hold of me. Kyle can put up my email address for Heights Church. I would encourage anyone to email me, and we can get you plugged in. There is a really strong community of sober people and some amazing people who walk with Christ. So even if Jesus isn't your thing, we have a really strong 12-step program too. So reach out to somebody. That's all it takes is that one time.
Thanks, Kenneth, for coming on. It was really cool to talk about LA with you. From our experience, how addiction sort of played into that, and to where we're both here now, both trying to help people. And it was just fun to relate and talk to you about all that, man. And so thanks for coming on the show. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Feel free to email us, and if you have a question for Kenneth, I'll get it to him, and I'll put his email right here. Recov Hub Podcast, thanks for tuning in. See you later.
Thanks, guys.